An embossed invitation slid from the wet pocket and struck the bookstore floor between his boots and the threshold. Clara bent without thinking and picked it up. The gold crest caught the shop lamp and made her stomach tighten with suspicion. She had spent 8 years building a business that kept the block the way she liked it. Small, quiet, and run on steady hours and shared trust. The sight of that crest spelled one clear danger: Heir Industries. The problem was immediate. If Heir showed interest, the neighborhood would change. Clara straightened. She held the invitation up. "Rain beaded at the hem of his coat, sir," she said, and her voice kept steady on the counter where she always worked. "This fell out of your pocket." Her hands did not shake. She put the paper between 2 catalogs so the damp would not ruin it. She wanted information. She also wanted a reason not to be afraid. He moved to retrieve it. Up close he smelled cedar and rain and something faintly tobacco-sour. He appeared younger than the silhouettes that usually represented Heir. Late 20s, well-shaped shoulders beneath a wool overcoat, dark hair still damp. He did not offer a name. He reached for the invitation with fingers that closed around fine paper. "Please," he said. "It's mine." His voice had a measured warmth that did not match the crest. Marcus looked up from the back table and folded his hands on the book in front of him. He always recognized trouble before Clara did. "Heir Industries," he said without looking at the invitation, and the name landed like a stone. Marcus' eyes held a practical caution. He drew a line in his posture. Clara could feel that crest belongs to them. His tone changed the room's margins. Clara felt her suspicion shift into guarded curiosity. "Adrian Heir." Clara, forcing the name out in the same breath, she offered her face for inspection. Her curiosity tightened and turned to a question she had not wanted to voice. Why would someone from that family be in her shop at closing hour? The man blinked. He did not deny the name. He did not give his surname at first. He only said, "I was leaving." He kept his hands open, palms exposed, as if he had done nothing. He set the invitation on the counter beside the receipt machine. Clara watched a small trimmer in one hand. It was a human trimmer, not a rehearsed one. Her suspicion softened into interest at that detail. His fingers lingered over the paper, then pulled away. Marcus rose and crossed in 2 quick steps. "You can TB from Heir and just buy all this." Marcus' voice tightened. He measured risk in property and community, and every flinch told him when something would cost Clara more than she could afford. "Why are you here at this hour?" Marcus demanded. Adrian steadied his gaze on Marcus. "I needed a place to wait out the storm," he said. "I didn't want a scene. I can help close up." He moved toward a pile of water, softened stock by the window, and began lifting book by book with careful, deliberate hands. The movement read like contrition or calculation. Clara could not tell which. Her suspicion wavered, then split into 2 tracks. Protect the bookstore, and understand why someone who could change the block might also be gentle with its damaged books. Clara watched him work. He handled each spine as if he knew how a book failed in damp weather. He laid waxed paper between covers, set cloths under bulging pages, and labeled each salvageable volume. Marcus kept circling with practical questions. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "Are you representing someone?" Marcus's tone was blunt. Adrian answered in small, precise sentences that revealed little and gave no title. For a while the shop felt like its usual late evening hush. Rain tapping on the windows, the lamp over the counter throwing a warm pool of light, the smell of tea in the air. Clara's hands moved on the cloths and pads. "Do you like books, Adrian?" She used his name because names steadied people. "Do you come here often?" He looked at her then, directly, and the guarded line around his face dropped for a fraction. "I do, now," he said. He arranged a stack of poetry as if setting out a small, private offering. That single soft action shifted Clara's emotion from curiosity to something like cautious warmth. She kept a short distance, but she stopped ordering him away. Outside, the rain drew narrow silver lines down the shop window. A car passed slowly on the street. The bell above the door had already stopped chiming because no one else had entered. The night compressed. Clara's mind ran through the practical consequences: Vale Industries buying the property next door, price increases, renters leaving, a change in customer names. Each image tightened her jaw. Marcus, one more hard question. Do you work for Vale? He Adrian's name sharply. Adrian Vale, are you here with Vale Industries? The words were quick. Clara's voice followed. If you are, then this isn't just rain damage. This is a scouting mission. She set a wet book on the counter and folded the cloth over it with hands that were steady because she had to be. Adrian hesitated. He looked at Clara for a long beat and then at Marcus. I am not here to close shops, he said. I am not here to buy anything tonight. Then he swallowed and added, I came to see if someone could care for me without knowing what I own. His words landed with rawness that did not fit the careful man who had set the books right. Clara's suspicion flipped. The new feeling was confusion edged with betrayal. Why come undercover and volunteer to help if not to test people? You came to test us, Clara. Her voice rose a notch. She placed her palms on the counter like a barrier. You used us as an experiment. Marcus moved forward, protective, his body between Adrian and the rest of the room. Adrian looked down. He did not speak immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. I didn't want to be only what my name gives me. I needed to know the person who might stand beside me would choose me for the person I am. He reached into his coat and produced a small leather wallet. He flipped it open. The wallet was plain, not emblazoned. He set it on the table as proof. I left my cards and the wallet at home. I wanted to be a man who could sit with someone and be seen. The explanation felt like an apology. Clara felt anger rise. The betrayal she had first smelled as suspicion now sharpened into a new, hot emotion. He had lied by omission. She tightened her jaw. You think you can lie about who you are and see whether we like you? She asked. Her voice clipped. Adrian, names matter here. They are not tests. They are what will cost us our shop if you make the wrong choice. She paused and pressed both hands into the cloth to stop the heat in her chest. Marcus answered for the room. You can decide our trust with a trick, he said. His tone was flat and quick. Adrian, if Vale is trying to move into this neighborhood, we need to know now. There was a quick exchange then, 3 short answers. Why us? We noticed you were gentle with the books. You left a crest. Each line cut the conversation into small, actionable pieces. The argument rolled like measured steps rather than a sweep of rhetoric. Adrian's face changed. The man who had been careful became candid. I didn't tell you because I wanted an honest reaction. That's the truth, he said. I thought if I came without a name, I could see what people saw when they didn't have a reason to be polite. His hands were still. He looked at Clara. I'm sorry if that feels like a trick. There was no dramatic retraction, only a measured apology. Clara's next move was practical. She had to protect the books and her shop more than punish a human curiosity. She handed him a stack of drying cloths. Then start by helping for real, she said. We close in 20 minutes. If you want to prove yourself, prove it by staying after the rain stops and helping with inventory. We have a ledger to update. Her voice carried a choice rather than a sentence of forgiveness. He nodded and took the cloths. He moved with an efficiency that read like another layer of his life. He worked beside Marcus and Clara. There were no easy smiles, only focused movements. Marcus checked stock with short questions. Where did you learn to handle damaged paper? Marcus, do you volunteer anywhere? Adrian answered briefly that he had studied conservation for a short period and had spent time in small community programs. Each exchange gave Clara facts she could use to assess him. Each fact drew a further shift in her feeling from ire toward guarded respect. Halfway through tagging and listing, a phone notification vibrated against Adrian's coat and slid, partly out of the pocket he had intended to leave empty. A folding card caught on the fabric and displayed a Vale municipal event invitation with his full name and title in embossed lettering. Marcus saw it first. He stood too quickly, the chair scraping. "That's not yours to hide," he said. He held the card between his fingers like evidence. The room tightened. This was the mid-chapter spike, a small cliffhanger that changed everything in an instant. Clara reached for the card. "Adrian Vale," she said. The name now served as a cut in the conversation. "Why didn't you say?" She spoke without melodrama. The salt in her voice was plain. "You mean you weren't here to close shops? You came to see people." "We trusted a man who said he wanted honesty." Her hands were working again, listing titles for the ledger, but her voice threaded the accusation through each number. Adrian did not argue. He stepped back, and for the first time his composure shivered. "Because I was afraid of what people would do if they knew who I was," he said. "Because I carry a name that comes with choices already made for other people." He spoke in short sentences. His explanation did not erase the deception. It laid out motive. This twist changed how Clara and Marcus understood his earlier gestures. It reframed kind actions as possibly calculated. The air between them grew sharp with new suspicion and a dawning empathy that did not cancel the hurt. Marcus's protective posture tightened. He pointed to the ledger. "You used us as part of whatever you reproving Adrian. That's not a neutral act for this shop." Marcus named concrete consequences: community trust, rising rents, the possibility of forced buyouts. His words cut toward action instead of forgiveness. He insisted that the bookstore needed a clear statement about Vale's intentions. Adrian took a breath. "I can tell you now what I should have said. Vale Industries is evaluating properties in this neighborhood for redevelopment, but not every decision is mine alone." He sat down in the chair he had been avoiding. "I came on my own. I paused to see whether someone would be honest with me without the weight of my name. I misjudged how that would look. I'm asking you to let me try to make amends by assisting tonight and by promising I will not use my position against this shop." He spoke plainly. The room waited, measuring whether words would translate into action. Clara looked at him for a long count. She felt her suspicion morph into anger, then into a cautious wish to test him on her terms. "You don't get to say you'll make amends and then walk away," she said. "You want to stay. Prove it. Help with the ledger. Tell Marcus where you were last week when those property scouts were around." She put the challenge into specific tasks. Her reactions were concrete because the shop needed concrete answers. He agreed and told them where he had been most evenings. At a small tea room across the river, walking alone, reading lists of old architecture. He offered no defense of Vale's policies. He promised only that his personal choices would not be made at the shop's expense. Marcus cross-checked the ledger entries and paced a short, practical list of questions about housing, tenants and plans. Each answer Adrian gave was short and usable. Listeners could see the negotiation turn into evidence. When the clock neared closing, Clara one last question: why the invitation? She held up the embossed card again. Why lose it in the doorway? His eyes flicked to the lamp and back. "It was meant for a different night," he said. "I left early. I didn't want the message to be taken as a statement when I arrived undercover. I know that sounds weak." He rubbed his thumb over the invitation's edge. He was measured. The exchange read like two people setting terms. The confrontation had dissolved into a conditional truce. Marcus relaxed slightly, though he kept his guard. He put the ledger away in orderly fashion. "If you cross one line, Adrian, you won't be able to undo the damage." The consequence plainly. "This isn't about remorse. It's about choices that hurt people here." Clara's reply was a whisper of a rule. "Trust is earned in actions, not explanations." Adrian paused, then moved to the counter and placed a small receipt with a stamp time beside the ledger. He left a handwritten note folded beneath the receipt. A line that read, "I am sorry." He did not sign with his full name. The gesture was awkwardly modest given his resources, but it was a concrete action. He set the note down and stepped back toward the door. Clara opened the door for him. Rain hit the mat and made brief wet patterns. He stepped out under the street lamp and paused on the threshold. "Clara," he said, using her name in the way people use a key to unlock steadiness. "If you ever want to know more, ask Marcus. He'll tell you if I'm keeping my word." He left before she could arrange the next sentence. His leaving was its own decision. Marcus closed the front and moved behind the counter to check the locks. "She'll watch you, Adrian. We'll watch you." The comment was not a threat. It was a practical vow. Clara stood at the counter with the note and the receipt in front of her. She read the single line again. Her chest felt full of a slow physical reaction. A tightening that told her the choice she faced was not only about property, but about whether she could trust a man who had lied to learn the truth. Outside, the rain kept falling in steady bands. The neighborhood lights made narrow gold pools along the pavement. Inside, the lamp over the counter hummed low. Clara folded the note and slid it into the ledger between today's entries. It sat between numbers and names and became part of the shop's record. That was how she processed decisions, by placing them where actions and consequences lived. The ledger closed. Marcus set the kettle on the small back burner and poured 2 cups of tea without ceremony. He placed one beside Clara and said, "You did well. You the right questions." Clara accepted the cup and blew across its surface once. The tea smelled of chamomile and damp leaves. She felt her anger move into a slow caution. That was the final shift, from immediate suspicion and betrayal to guarded acceptance of a conditional future. Before Adrian stepped into the rain, he had left a single small bookmark tucked into a stack of rescued books, and a folded receipt with a note. That act functioned as both apology and an invitation to watch. Clara kept both items together on the counter. They were small, physical things she could use to measure whether a person would keep a promise. She locked the front door with hands that did not tremble. The concrete choice she made was to protect the shop first, then to test him in the future. She would not ban him outright. She would not let him in as a silent owner. She would put conditions on his presence and require that actions prove him. She wrote that decision into the ledger as a line item: watch, verify, respond. Adrian stepped back into the rain after leaving the receipt and the note on the counter, and Clara tightened her grip on the paper as the front door clicked shut. Marcus slipped an arm behind a stack of unsorted returns and his fingers closed on paper before the light hit it. The envelope came free, soaked at one corner, the gold crest rubbing wet against Marcus's thumb. Clara looked up from the ledger with a jar of stamps in her hand and felt suspicion tighten the way she held the jar. She had avoided that crest for years, and she moved toward Marcus without thinking. The shop smelled of damp cardboard and the sharp lemon of cleaner. The lamp over the counter hummed. Marcus held the invitation up so the lamp could read the letters aloud in the wet. And Clara saw the name and the small seal she kept herself from answering before she opened the shop 8 years ago. Clara's suspicion made her close the distance between the counter and the back room in 3 quick steps. She reached for the invitation. The paper left a wet line across her thumb. "Where did this come from?" she asked. Her voice was level, not small. She wanted an answer that would fix the sudden, unsteady place in the shop's routine. Marcus set the invitation on the ledger and scrubbed his hand on his jeans. "From the pocket of the coat you left on the hook," he said. It was tucked in there. The discovery was the first external crack in the evening. Outside, rain hit the awning in a steady drum that made the window look like a moving film. The central problem declared itself plainly. Someone tied to that crest had brushed into Clara's carefully ordinary life, and the evidence sat on the counter in plain sight. Clara pressed her fingers to the seal and recognized the family crest on sight. She had spent years rejecting offers and pressure connected to that house. She had rebuilt a small, stubborn corner of the neighborhood that didn't answer to the wealthy families who once tried to buy her lease. The invitation was not a rumor. It was a thing she could touch, Marcus had been closing and muttering about the delivery when he found the coat shoved behind a box. Adrian had left it slung over a chair earlier, saying he needed to check inventory. Clara's hands tightened around the invitation, and Marcus watched her carefully, as if she might break. "Adrian," Clara called. The name landed in the back room, and Adrian's silhouette filled the doorway, wet coat dark against the backlight. He moved in with measured steps, but Clara felt the old surge of guardedness that came from anyone who belonged to money she had learned to distrust. Adrian crossed the floor slowly, hands empty, face holding the same calm that had made him appear harmless the night he'd first come in. Clara's suspicion guided her now. She needed proof, not explanations. She set the invitation between them as if it were an accusation. "This was in your coat," she said. "It has your crest." Marcus leaned in, voice clipped. There was also a card. He jabbed toward Adrian's leather messenger bag sitting on a stool. The bag's flap was closed but not latched. The room shifted into a new urgency. Talk had to become concrete evidence or a denial that could be tested. Adrian kept his eyes on Clara. He had told them he worked freelance, that he liked bookstores, that he preferred simple food and walked the wet sidewalks. He had not said his name. He had not offered a family a history or invitations to anything gold embossed. Now there was a gold edge on the counter, and Marcus's hand reached, impatient, for the satchel. Adrian's jaw moved once. Marcus unbuckled the bag with one practiced motion and tipped its contents out on the ledger. A fleece scarf, a notebook, a fountain pen, and then a flat, engraved business card that caught the lamp and spat a title in small raised letters. Clara read the name and the family crest and felt the suspicion hollow into something sharper. Adrian Vale, Marcus, reading the card aloud slow enough that the syllables landed like stones. Adrian Vale, Private Counsel, Vale Holdings. Clara's mouth went dry. She remembered the brief moment in Chapter 1 when an embossed invitation had slid from a wet pocket and struck the bookstore floor between a stranger's boots and her threshold. She had set it aside then and kept her distance because the Vale name had meant complications. Now the same crest lay on her ledger beside her hands. "So you lied, Clara. You lied about who you are." Her voice was calm, but she pressed her thumb on the wet paper until it dented slightly. The dent was a small, concrete thing she could feel. Adrian's face broke the way a practiced mask cracks. A small dulling at the eyes, a movement in the shoulders, then a controlled inhale. He did not look like a villain. He looked tired. He folded his palms in front of him. "I didn't mean to," he started. Clara cut him off. "Why? Why walk into my shop and tell me nothing if you were going to hide your name like that?" The question was not only about one lie. It was about trust in the narrow world she had fought to keep honest. Marcus leaned on the counter, the lamp reflecting off the watch at his wrist. "He's been here all week, Marcus," he reads in the back. "He buys a cup of tea, he helps with heavy deliveries." Adrian's voice came lower. "Because I wanted to know what I would be given if you didn't know who I was." He paused to let the sentence land. Clara felt a shift from suspicion to anger move through her body. She stepped back, and the anger made her hands do something simple and physical. She pushed the ledger closed and slid the invitation into the drawer for later. "So you tested me," she said. "You tested my shop. You used my time." The accusation was sharp and short. Marcus rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Clara, we done to know everything," he said. "But the card is there." The room filled with actions instead of abstract feelings. Clara paced a step and then another. She tucked a loose curl behind her ear the way she always did when thinking. Adrian watched that motion and softened, as if the small, human gesture mattered more than a title. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "I thought if I stepped back from everything that came with my name, I'd see who I actually was when no one offered me anything." The admission was plain. Marcus made a short sound that could have been a laugh or a scoff. "You can do that without consequences," he said. Clara's anger shifted into a colder assessment. She wanted answers she could use to protect the shop from the ripple this would cause. An external event broke the room's loop. The doorbell chimed with a sharp, mechanical note, and a rain-drenched woman peered into the window. She was a delivery driver, soaked, carrying a box addressed to the bookstore. Clara moved to the door, opened it, and signed the pad without letting the driver in. The second event pushed the group into footer work. The delivery had to be stored, the receipts filed. It was the practical interruption that made the conversation return to facts. Marcus used the break to pull the business card closer and examine the embossing. "This is not a fake," he said. "It's engraved. It's Vale." Clara held the card and noticed the weight of the letters. Adrian watched her fingers on the metal and stepped forward. "I should have told you," he said. "I jumped. I thought I could be small here. I thought I could be just—" He stopped, searching for the word. "Just someone who reads." Marcus shook his head. "You used a lie to build a seat in front of her counter, Adrian." The accusation came fast, 3 lines in quick succession. The room's pressure rising. Clara's thinking tightened. She had to decide in small, practical steps. Ask him to leave now, or let him explain in full and risk a public unraveling later. She chose to ask for an immediate explanation that could be tested. "Why the invitation in your pocket?" she asked. "Why would your family send this here?" Adrian exhaled. "They sent it last week," he said. "It was a private thing, an event to meet donors and trustees. I didn't want them there. I left before dinner," he was specific. The detail cut through one layer of mystery. Clara felt a slight shift from suspicion into a restless curiosity. She moved closer to the doorway and glanced into the street, where rain made columns of light from a lamppost. "Why bring it here at all?" she asked. Adrian looked down at the invitation on the counter and then at her. "I meant to throw it away," he said. "I meant to slip it into a return box and forget the name on it." He paused, then reached into his coat and took out a folded receipt from a bookstore across the river, an ordinary thing, stamped and dated. He laid it next to the invitation. "I bought the receipt," he said. "I wanted evidence that I showed up without the name." The admission was small, but it was concrete. An attempt to manufacture not just anonymity, but confirmation of how he wanted to be seen. Clara's anger cooled into something closer to wounded. The shop's ledger, a real thing, now bore records she could use to check his story. Marcus frowned. "That's oddly theatrical," he said. "Or it's a sign he planned this. Either way, it's not honest." The 3 of them had entered a pattern of rapid back and forth that left no room for long speeches. Adrian's jaw clenched. "I know it looks performative," he said, "but I wanted to know if I could be allowed to be ordinary." One of the rules Clara relied on was that actions carry more truth than words. She watched his fingers flex on the counter and decided to test him. "Then prove it," she said. "Tell me something no one would know about a job you took here." Adrian blinked. He answered with a precise memory. The name of a supplier who had briefly over-delivered last Tuesday, the quantity of envelopes that were returned, the way a certain crease appeared on a box from the publisher they both favored. He described the coffee stain on the ledger's corner and named the book Clara used as a notepad when numbers were tight. Each detail fit together like small tools in the shop's life. Marcus listened, then nodded slowly. Clara felt a shift. Suspicion had become a measured openness. She still guarded, but she let evidence lead. That openness did not erase the card, and it did not stop Marcus from finding yet one more thing. He turned through Adrian's notebook and found a pressed ticket stub folded into a page. A valet ticket with a familiar name printed on the stub. Marcus held it up. "He's been carrying proof of a different life. Marcus, this isn't an accident." The room tightened again. Clara stood very still and felt a new emotion push, betrayal behind her ribs. Betrayal moved her body the way a slap moves the hand. She reached for the counter and steadied herself. Adrian's face did not show the theatrics of a man used to being called out. It showed the small exhaustion of someone who had been staying awake to pace an idea into being. I didn't mean to betray you, he said. I wanted to see if I could be chosen without that name. His voice was steady and simple. Clara had to decide whether to break him or to break what he thought he could have. Her actions answered before her thinking. She pushed open the main door and stepped out into the rain. The rain hit her cheeks in cold slaps. The lamplight made the drops look like short white sticks. She walked 3 paces away, and the wet of the sidewalk soaked the hem of her skirt. Marcus followed to the threshold and stayed under the small eave, hands in pockets. Adrian stayed in the doorway, rain outlining his coat. They faced each other like 3 people separated by a problem that could not be solved by talk alone. How could you do that to me, Clara? How could you come here, sit with us, and not say who you are? Her voice was small now, but the words cut clean. Adrian's hand found the strap of his bag. He unfastened it and left it loose at his side. In the space between the 3, a man walked by under an umbrella and glanced at the shop as if it were a scene in a play. He kept walking. That small external movement became the mini cliffhanger. A car passed and its headlights revealed a foil envelope tucked into the opened flap of Adrian's satchel. Marcus saw it and lunged forward, fingers close to the satchel, but a delivery truck idled onto the street and forced a pause as a driver climbed out. The interruption left the envelope half seen and the group uncertain. The pause hung. Clara felt a cold knot of fear that the envelope might be something decisive. Marcus moved first. He rushed forward and pulled the satchel open with blunt hands. From a pocket came a gilt square of paper, the high-end invitation, slightly mud, splattered, and beneath it a folded card embossed with an address and an recipe. Marcus spun the card so Clara could read it. Look at the date, Marcus. It's for tomorrow. The reveal landed like a collision. Clara's betrayal turned to anger again, but this time a practical, immediate anger. The question of why Adrian would keep the card and what he planned to do tomorrow. Adrian's mouth opened and closed. You plan to go, Clara, tomorrow. Her words were spaced into short hits. You kept this for when the time was right. Adrian looked at the card and then at the rain. He stepped forward and put one hand on the counter, close enough that Clara could see the faint scar at his left eyebrow. I didn't plan to hurt you, he said. I wanted to make a choice without my family's presence in the room. Marcus's voice cut in, brisk and practical. Then be honest now. Do you accept the invitation? Or are you coming tomorrow to do it all over again? Hide in a chair until someone offers you something. The argument that followed met the requirement for an intense exchange. Rapid short lines, 3 to 6 turns, each name used. Adrian, you lied. Clara. Adrian, you used my shop. Clara, I came here because I wanted to belong. Adrian answered. Marcus, you saw the card. Marcus. Marcus, you can just assume his intent. Clara countered. The conversation moved like hands trading tools. Each line revealed character. Marcus' a blunt practicality. Adrian's repeated softness. Clara's wary protectiveness. The rapid back and forth forced Adrian into a choice he could not dodge. He made it visibly. Adrian removed his silver watch and placed it on the counter, the small pledge from outline beat 7 made real. The watch caught the lamp's light and lay there plain, a simple object he owned without fanfare. His fingers trembled a fraction as he set it down. I can take this with me if I'm leaving this life, he said. Keep it until I prove I am not that man. The gesture was specific and small. It asked Clara to accept a token in place of an explanation. Clara's hands hovered over the watch. Her heartbeat was an insistent physical drum under her ribs. She considered the practical choices. Keep the watch as leverage, give it back, or take it and fold it into a drawer with the other proofs. Clara slid the watch toward her with 2 fingers. I'll take it for now, she said. But keep in mind, trust is earned here through what you do in daylight, not through tokens. Marcus nodded once, satisfied by a practical result. Adrian's chest eased as if a small weight had lifted now that he had laid something down. He did not try to explain more. His posture said that he had given a concrete piece of himself and would not demand immediate absolution. The rain made a steady hiss at the door. After the confrontation, the immediate crisis resolved into quieter actions. Marcus stacked the scattered items and put them back into the bag, making sure the business card lay face down. Clara walked the aisles and checked the returns, physically sorting paper and boxes in methodical steps. Each small movement was an emotional expression. She chose to keep the shop orderly because out of order meant vulnerable. Adrian lingered near the doorway, hands clasped behind his back. "Clara," he said, "I will not hide again." The sentence was short and specific. Clara measured it against the wet card and the watch on her palm. That night, after the rain slackened, Clara sat at a small table with a bookmarked book open and a folded receipt pressed between its pages. The same receipt Adrian had shown earlier. She read the date aloud because speaking facts made them real. "June 12th, she said. 3 weeks ago. Marcus leaned against a shelf and flicked through the ledger without looking. "The Vale invitation is for a dinner," he said. "It's not a household party. There will be their trustees and people with money to influence things." Clara closed the book and slid the receipt into a back pocket of the volume. The action was deliberate. She had moved the evidence into the environment that mattered to her store. Before anyone left, Clara one small, specific thing. "If you go tomorrow, Adrian, you will come in the morning and tell me why." Her voice had regained a professional calm. "Tell me why you'll walk into a room with your name on the table and what you want from that conversation." Adrian nodded. "I will come at 9, he said. "I will tell you everything I can without the family at the table." Marcus pushed off the shelf and gathered the returned boxes. "I will be here if things get messy," he said. The practical offer was a second safeguard. They closed the shop together with small, orderly motions. The lamp turned low, the door latched, the umbrella holder neatly aligned. The evening's events had resolved the immediate fracture into a plan that hinged on tomorrow. As Clara tucked the business card into the back of the ledger, she felt the last emotion settle in her body. Unease, not the grand poetic kind, but the real, physical lurch of someone who had been shown a lie and must now choose a response. She slid the receipt deeper into the bookmarked page and snapped off the lamp. Outside, rain left a glossy wet on the pavement. Adrian stood a moment under the eave and then walked away, coat collar up, head down against the weather. Marcus locked the gate and called after him once, "Don't be late, Adrian." Adrian didn't turn. Clara drew the blinds and set the small closed sign in the window. The chapter ended on a concrete note. Clara put the watch into the drawer labeled running tab and closed it with a firm hand. The drawer's click was the final sound, a closure anchored to a specific object and a decision that would matter tomorrow. Clara pushed open the heavy library door and found Adrian already at the reserved table, his overcoat folded across the back of the chair. A valet ticket tucked into the pocket of the coat. Suspicion tightened her voice before she spoke. She crossed the carpet with the stack of rare catalogues in her hands and set them down without looking away. He looked up once, then stood and offered the chair with a small, precise smile. "Clara," he said, and the single name sounded polite. "Careful." She nodded and sat opposite him, hands on the catalogue, eyes on the coffee stain at the corner of his napkin. The central problem was clear in her chest. His stories did not fit the room around him. She thought of the invitation that had fallen in the rain 2 nights earlier, the gold crest that had alighted on the shop floor and made her stomach tighten. She thought of Marcus holding the soaked envelope in the back room, and the way he had pressed his thumb over the crest, as if he wanted to test whether it was real. Those concrete moments mattered now. They made the small inconsistencies in Adrian's account look deliberate. Clara opened the catalogue and forced her voice even. "The first edition lists condition notes. Which copy did you want me to check?" She put the question on the table like a ledger entry. Adrian tapped the page with a finger and answered without hesitation, the edition bound in calfskin, the margin notes. The one you recommended in your email. His voice was a warm baritone that matched the shape of his face, steady and measured. Clara watched him. She watched the silver watch on his wrist, the precise cut of his cuff, the slight fray at the corner of his messenger bag. She listened for contradiction between his words and what the room showed. Her suspicion shifted into doubt as she catalogued small details. They moved through the books together. She pointed at a foxed page, and he read the marginalia aloud, soft enough to keep other patrons from hearing. Between chapters they offered personal details in doses, where she had learned to catalogue by hand how he liked his tea. He managed a small foundation. He preferred to keep the world uncomplicated. Clara accepted these details but did not let them settle. Her hands found a corner of an envelope tucked inside a catalogue she had brought as reference and moved it to the light. Not an old receipt, she thought, but a valid ticket. She did not announce the find. She slid the paper back under the page and continued the conversation testing. The first emotional shift arrived as a narrow H of uncertainty. She had felt confident in the shop, sure of the rules that kept her small world stable. Now she felt watched by a question. Did Adrian believe she would be carried by a name? She herself whether she wanted to know the answer. Marcus arrived without fanfare. He entered the library and paused at the doorway, hat damp with rain. He had tracked Clara's RSVP that afternoon and moved through the room with the blunt, steady walk of someone who felt protective out of habit. Clara, Marcus. And his tone held the kind of flat alarm she trusted. He looked at Adrian and then at the valet ticket that had been nudged into view when she adjusted a book. Marcus' jaw worked. Marcus, Clara. She named him like a ledger entry again, a way to anchor the conversation. This is Adrian. Adrian, this is Marcus Reed. Marcus came to the table and set his satchel down. He did not smile. Adrian, he said simply, and the word carried a question. Marcus had been a regular at the shop since Clara opened the back room for city writers. He kept her grounded and asked practical questions when she was too polite to probe. He had already seen Adrian's name on the event list. Marcus' presence turned suspicion into an external demand. Explain. Adrian stood and met Marcus at eye level. He did not raise his voice. Marcus, good to meet you. Clara mentioned you. Marcus did not allow small talk. Do you work at the foundation, or do you run it? He asked. His phrasing left no space for the vague modesty Adrian had offered earlier. Adrian's fingers tightened on the back of his chair. He paused, then answered, I manage certain projects. I try to keep a low profile. Marcus' gaze did not move. A low profile from someone wearing a tailored coat and a watch like that. Clara felt the conversation split her choices. She wanted the books to be the center. She also wanted to protect the shop's good name and the literacy program that depended on clear motives. Marcus looked at her for a decision. Adrian, you've said one thing to me and your coat says another. I need to know which is true. Adrian's face shifted. For a breath it looked unguarded. He moved his hands once, folding them on the table, and their exact small motion was an attempt to translate fear into words. I didn't mean to mislead you, he said. I wanted to see if people met me without the family name. Clara's suspicion tightened again, this time into anger. You tested me. You used a false story to see who would like you. Adrian's eyes dropped. He stood and stepped back a pace. I was afraid of being liked for the wrong reasons. You thought what, Adrian? Marcus's voice rose only slightly. You thought you could place yourself as ordinary and then decide if this town and this woman passed your inspection. Adrian's reply came in a rush that was earnest but clipped. I wasn't looking to pass inspection. I was looking for honest conversation. I didn't know how to begin without hiding. Clara had two impulses. One was to slam the table with a rigid refusal. The other was to listen for proof she could hold in her hand. She drew air and asked a practical question. If you manage projects, Why did the invitation with your family crest end up in my shop 2 nights ago? Adrian's fingers touched the valet ticket in his pocket the way someone might check for a bruise. He did not answer immediately. The pause read as strategy. Clara felt the second emotion shift, move from anger toward a guarded curiosity. Marcus stepped in with a blunt observation. Your name was on the event guest list. I saw it. It isn't the name of a manager. It's the family name. He looked at Adrian. Which is it? Adrian met Marcus' eyes, then met Clara's. My name is Adrian Vale. My family runs the Vale Foundation. I am an heir. But I did not come here as an heir. I came here without using the name because I needed to find out whether you would take me at face value. I didn't plan to be cruel. I thought I could be smaller and honest. The words precisely. Clara read each syllable for its weight. She thought of the crest, the wet envelope, the gold that had flashed under the shop lamp. She listened to the rawness in his voice and to the way his hands folded. Her response was not a single line. It became a series of small actions that carried judgment. She pushed the catalogue away and stood. Adrian, you asked for honest conversation. You started with a lie. I can feel that. She spoke with short sentences. The room felt suddenly louder, the carpet fibers catching at her shoes. Adrian did not argue. He reached into his coat and produced a small folded paper, the kind Clara had seen on the bench behind the shop. An invitation, clean and embossed with a crest and the name Vale Philanthropy. He set it on the table without flourish. Clara's fingers closed on the edge of the invitation, as if to take it back into evidence. She read the printed names aloud, matching each to a memory. Vale Philanthropy, she said. This is your foundation's invitation. Adrian nodded. It is. I didn't want to use it to get into your life. I wanted you to decide based on conversation, not on who I am on paper. Marcus's mouth tightened. You picked a test subject and placed yourself at her door with a false occupation, he said. That feels like manipulation. Adrian's eyes moved to Clara. Tell me where that feels different to you, Clara. Tell me what I did wrong. Clara felt another sudden shift in feeling. The anger thinned into a raw, steadier pain that was close to betrayal. She thought of the bookstore's ledger, of the donors who trusted her, of the literacy program that had just received an unannounced gift. She also thought of the small kindnesses in Adrian's manner over the last weeks. How he had noticed the marginalia that mattered, how he had kept his voice low when other patrons needed quiet. She did not let the moment become a long speech. She kept to practical questions and physical actions. Why my shop? She asked. Why pick me? Adrian took a breath and answered in short sentences. You run a program that matters. You are honest. I read your reviews. I thought this would be a place where motives mattered more than names. I wanted to find out if I could belong without announcing the name that comes with guarded rooms. Clara lifted the invitation and turned it so the crest faced the dim ceiling light. She slid her thumb across the embossed gold and watched for flaking or wear. Her fingers found a second item inside the invitation. A return card with a printed donor code and a small handwriting note. The handwriting matched none she recognized. She read the note aloud. Thank you for agreeing to consult. We appreciate your time. Adrian Vale. The paper smelled faintly of rain and expensive ink. For a moment Clara felt a new, strange clarity. The concrete fact of his name on the page, and the way he had used it only in private made his confession both truer and more manipulative. Marcus placed his hand on the table, Adrian leaving a donor card and a private note, and then showing up as a catalog consultant. That's not neutral. What were you testing, the bookstore or Clara? Adrian's jaw flexed. He looked smaller in that quiet. I wanted to know whether you, the person, would listen to me without the name on a letterhead. I wanted to learn whether I could be known accurately without the family. I wanted to give something back, too. If that looks like manipulation, I accept that. Clara felt the room tilt under a new weight. She set the invitation down and stood. Her movement was compact and deliberate. She had to decide if she would keep listening, if she would accept his small, late confessions, and if she would fold the donor card into her record without telling the board how she had found that generosity. She left the table and walked slowly among the stacks. She touched the spines she had catalogued for years. She counted the concrete facts: a donor card, an invitation, a private note, a valid ticket. The facts did not add up to an answer she liked. She returned to the table and faced Adrian. If you wanted me to see you without the name, why bring the donor card at all? Why not let us speak, and then, if you chose, offer help openly? Her voice was short. Adrian swallowed. I was afraid that if I offered help, and you accepted because of the money, you would resent me. I didn't want gratitude tied to my name. I wanted honest consent. I thought hiding the name would force that. Clara's expression hardened. You made my choice for me. You removed context that matters to my decisions. You can decide to erase the ledger of who funds what, and then expect I want object. She named the ledger again. It was a practical concept she used when listing donors and obligations. Silence grew around them like another patron. Marcus spoke then with a voice stripped of mockery. Clara, do you want me to walk you out? Clara looked at Marcus, at the steady lines around his mouth. She looked at Adrian and saw his hands, the small scar at his eyebrow. She thought of the literacy program and of the receipt she would later find slipped into a returned book. She made a choice of behavior rather than a declaration of feeling. No, she said, I'll go back to the shop by myself. Marcus, thank you. Marcus rose and inclined his head. He did not leave immediately. He stood in the doorway long enough for Clara to see him waiting to act if needed. Clara packed the catalogues. Her hands moved with businesslike efficiency. She did not allow a long argument. She focused on tasks. The movement translated emotion into work. That was her way of holding decisions. Outside the library, the rain had picked up. She pulled her wool scarf tighter and felt the cold bead at the hairline of her neck. The city smelled of wet pavement and car exhaust. She took the bus back to the bookstore, counting the stops as if keeping a ledger. Back at the shop, she found an envelope on the back table. It had been slipped under the jar of stamps. Inside was a discreet donation receipt and a small transfer note to the Literacy Fund bearing the Vale Foundation name. The paper was crisp, the numbers clean. The find complicated the argument in a way that forced another emotion shift. The donation suggested genuine care. It also suggested that Adrian had tried to influence decisions from outside her knowledge. Clara read the receipt twice, and then checked the donor code against the ledger. The entry matched the transfer note. She walked to the window and watched the street. The rain blurred the passers-by into clear shapes. She thought about Adrian's confession in the stacks and about Marcus's bluntness. She felt betrayed and also aware of a practical truth. The literacy program would operate more effectively with the funds. She called Marcus. He arrived within minutes, bringing a thermos and the exact practical tone she needed. They sat at the back table and listed options aloud in short sentences. We can accept the money and note the donor's method of contact. Or we can return it until we know the motive. Marcus, if we return it, the program suffers. Clara replied. If we accept, what do we tell the board? That a wealthy man tested me and then sent money. Marcus set down the thermos and folded his hands. Tell the board the truth about the gift and how it was made. Let them decide policy. Do not make a private bargain that becomes a precedent. His voice was flat and practical. Clara agreed. She wrote a note to the board and included the receipt image. She attached her observations. The act of documentation calmed her. It translated indignation into records. That night she could not sleep. She reread the invitation and the donor note. She took the small leather wallet she kept for petty donations and checked its pockets. In one slot she found a folded scrap of newsprint with a phone number and a penciled name. Adrian. She set the wallet beside the ledger and breathed long enough to plan a morning. At dawn, Adrian stood outside the bookstore. He left a worn copy of Clara's favorite poet on the doorway mat and an honest, brief note tucked into the pages. She found the book with the courier's soft scrape of the door. The note did not beg forgiveness, it for time. Clara read the short lines twice he had written. I am sorry for the way I began. I am not asking for an answer today. I would like to earn time, not demand it. She pressed her thumb to the ink. She did not fold the note into a drawer. She did not throw the book away. She opened the poet's pages and found a pressed leaf between the lines, damp from rain. The leaf smelled of cedar and rain. She set the book on the counter and turned away to the ledger, the donation receipt, and the board email draft. The chapter resolved its immediate conflict. Adrian confessed, the donation was logged, and Clara chose to document the gift and request board oversight. The confrontation in the hotel library had reached its peak and settled into practical consequences. She had not forgiven him. She had not accepted his method. She had accepted the donor funds conditionally and asked for transparency. Clara watched the street through the shop window and balanced anger with procedure. She had moved from suspicion to confrontation, then to the slow work of deciding. The final action was a small, concrete one. She left the poet's book open on the counter where patrons could see it and where Adrian's handwriting rested. The book held proof of his apology and an unanswered question. It was a decision made into an object. The next chapter would begin with that object on the table. Emotion root suspicion. A leather wallet hit the wet pavement and sent paper skittering like a small, stubborn confession under the amber street lamp. Clara bent before she thought, fingers cold, and picked out a valet ticket and an embossed invitation with the same gold crest she had already seen once that week. Suspicion tightened in her throat. She had opened the private library door 3 nights ago and found that crest tucked into a coat pocket, and now the same crest lay in her hands again. That suspicion drove her off the curb and into the street, where Adrian stood a few steps away, rain beading on the wool of his overcoat. Clara held the invitation out. Adrian, what is this? Her voice did not shake, but her jaw did. She had run her hands over ledgers and catalogues for 8 years. She did not mistake privilege for accident. She folded the paper and tapped the valet ticket against her palm. You mean you came by chance? You mean you worked nearby? Her eyes searched his face for explanation. Adrian dropped his gaze, then lifted it to meet hers. Clara, he said, and his voice was the warm baritone she remembered from the library table. I can explain. He straightened the collar of his overcoat. Rain hit the brim of his hair into dark strands that clung to his forehead. His grey-green eyes were steady, almond-shaped and narrow with an effort to stay neutral. Clara's suspicion shifted into anger without warning. Explain what? That you lied about where you park. That you lied about the kind of life you live. She kept the invitation between them like evidence. She could hear Marcus' footsteps already, a cadence she recognized from the block. Marcus came when Clara needed him, and he had showed her the envelope in the back room. She did not want to be told she had misread everything. Adrian moved closer, careful, his leather messenger bag slung across one shoulder. I didn't mean to deceive you the way you think, he said. I wanted to know if someone here would know me without the rest. His hand sought the paper in her grip. Please, Clara. His fingers hovered an inch from the invitation, but did not take it. Marcus' voice cut across the curb when he arrived, breath visible in the cool, wet air. Clara, you okay? He was 5 feet away, knit cap in hand, damp hair at his temples. He saw the ticket and the crest immediately. Adrian. What's going on? Marcus' tone was practical. He had the habit of naming things as if naming them reduced their danger. Clara turned toward Marcus and let heat in her voice. He's ordinary. He pays like everyone else. She Adrian's name again, hard. Adrian, why did you let me believe you were someone else? Her hands balled the paper. Why the valet? Why the invitation? Adrian inhaled because I was afraid. Clara. afraid that anyone would like me for my name or my money, and not for who I am when I stand in your shop and hand you a receipt for a sandwich. I wanted to know if I could be chosen without the crest. His pause was long enough for rain to pat the street. Marcus stepped forward, eyebrows down. Who you to do that? Who else knew? He looked at Adrian like a mechanic examining a piece of machinery that might be dangerous if it moved wrong. This isn't a harmless experiment if it breaks someone. Marcus' voice had the firmness of a man who had kept Clara's business afloat with small, steady favors and blunt honesty. Clara's suspicion hardened into a different shape: betrayal. She could count the ways Adrian's presence had touched the shop: small purchases, a quiet chair in the corner, a voice that lingered longer than business required. Were those kindnesses genuine, or were they steps in a test? She thought of the embossed invitation that had fallen in Chapter 1, of the valet ticket tucked in the overcoat in the private library. Those events were concrete now. She had handled the paper, seen its gold crest flash under her lamp. The betrayal was a list of facts. Adrian's jaw tightened. I did it on my own. No one told me to come here. No one told me to leave things for you. He ran a hand through dark brown hair, slightly tousled. And the action looked like the same nervous tick she had seen when he paused before speaking. I put receipts in the coat. I bought a book you recommended. I paid at the register like anyone else. I wanted to know if you would notice me without knowing me. He watched her for a sign. Clara shoved the invitation into the pocket of her linen apron and turned toward the bookstore doorway, rain trailing off the wool scarf at her neck. That's not for you to decide, Adrian. You can design someone's feeling and call it truth. She pushed the door open with both hands and stepped back into the warm shop, the bell above the door keying a short, clear note. Inside, she closed the back room between them and set the invitation on the ledger table. The shop smelled of old paper, chamomile tea and damp wool, the same scents tied to her life here. Her pulse hammered in her ears in a way she demanded herself to own as anger instead of hurt. Sit down, she said. Marcus stood by the register with his satchel at his feet. Adrian took off his wool overcoat and hung it on the hook by the backroom door, careful with the fabric, the silver watch on his wrist catching the lamplight. The valet ticket fell from a pocket and fluttered to the floor. He crouched to pick it up and handed it to her without touching the invitation. His hands moved with the same measured, contained gestures Clara had noticed before, folding his hands when nervous, pausing before he answered. Marcus did not sit. I want to know who else knew, he said. Did anyone tell you to leave notes? Did anyone tell you to come here? His questions came fast, each one a tool. His warm tenor had the flatness of someone trying not to lose his temper. Adrian met Marcus' sighs. No one told me. No one coached me. This was my act. I thought if I showed up like anyone else, if I paid for a cup of tea, if I left a small receipt, then I could see whether the person at the counter knew me for me. He looked at Clara. I didn't plan to hurt you. I didn't plan for the invitation to fall. I was careless with my coat. He the last words like a man who had rehearsed them. Clara paced the short length between the stacks and the counter. Physical movement kept her anchored. Suspicion shifted into grief that small, private things could be used as instruments. You used me to test something about yourself. Her voice lowered. You used my trust. She looked at Marcus, then back at Adrian. Marcus' mouth tightened. Adrian, were you watching her? His tone held a protective edge, watching when she closed, watching when she signed receipts, tracking when she left the shop. He pushed forward so his face was close enough that they could not avoid seeing each other's eyes. Adrian's shoulders rose. I came to the shop. I bought items. I read in the corner. I left notes here and there, small things, bookmarks, receipts, because I wanted to be part of this place without the crest following me in. Clara's name. Clara? I wanted to see if anyone would like me when no one knew who I was. I didn't think. His words cut off. He could not finish the thought about the ethics of intention. Clara's hands found the ledger as if to steady herself. She opened to the page where she logged donations and small purchases that helped keep the shop. She had a record of every anonymous dollar that had come in. She recalled, in detail, a folded receipt she had found in the back coat weeks ago, a receipt for a tea and a second-hand book. Her fingers went hot with recognition. "You left receipts here before," she said. "You paid for things and left the slips. You made sure it looked small, like an ordinary person doing ordinary things. Who else did you leave things for?" Adrian's expression shifted from contrition to urgency. "Only this shop." "Only you." He reached for the stack of receipts in his overcoat pocket, as if that would prove his claim, and pulled them out. He unfolded a small stack of folded papers and placed them on the table. Each one had Clara's stamp on the corner from purchases, tea, a paperback, a rare catalogue, fee paid in cash. The paper was creased from being carried in a pocket, damp at one edge. Marcus seized one and scanned it. "He bought this 3 times last month, Marcus. Look, dates here." He looked up at Adrian. "Why did you think you had the right to decide how she loved?" His voice carried a blunt, moral weight. Adrian's face shifted again from defensiveness to a softer sadness. "Because I have been inside places where people chose me for my name, rather than for how I stood in a room. I did not want that here. I wanted to see Clara for Clara, not for what she could be next to my name. I thought I could observe myself without hurting anyone." He Clara's name slowly, each syllable careful. "I did not mean to make you the subject of an experiment." His hand trembled slightly as he rubbed his thumb over the crease of a receipt. Clara leaned on the ledger table and let her fingers press into the paper ledger. Her breathing measured itself. The suspicion that had ruled her first moments now folded into a wary curiosity. She wanted to know if the receipts were evidence of care or a trail of manipulation. The action of checking dates, of touching the paper, made everything concrete. "Show me everything you have. Show me what you left, and tell me why you did it." Not for a speech, just facts. Her voice was steady. She wanted specifics. Adrian nodded and pushed forward the little pile of folded notes, receipts, a bookmark with a shortened note, an underlined recommendation and a time. "I wrote that one because you told me to read it out loud in the back room the first time," he said. "Me, the author, would make me look like a fool for missing the point. I wanted to know if you would tell me that to my face." His eyes dropped to the bookmark. He looked vulnerable in a way she had not seen before, guarded, then suddenly open. Marcus folded his arms. "So you wanted her to be honest without knowing why?" He sounded incredulous. "You forced honesty by hiding the truth." He shook his head. "That's not the same as being seen." Adrian Marcus's questions landed like small stones. Who else knew about the receipts? Who else bought books and left slips? Adrian inhaled, then let out a longer breath. "No one else. I paid at the register. I kept the notes folded. I avoided asking about the shop's accounts. I didn't tell anyone about the badge on the invitation. I thought I could keep the 2 lives separate." "I was wrong." His hands tightened into fists on the table, knuckles pale against the wood. Clara moved through the back room to a coat hook and took Adrian's overcoat in hand. She felt the weight of it, the wool still warm from his shoulders, the faint scent of cedar and rain with a tobacco trace. She probed a pocket and found, beneath a lining, a small stack of folded notes and a faded receipt that matched the one she had once catalogued. Her fingers found handwriting she now recognized as a careful hand, not a copy. The discovery reframed the pattern. The receipts were not random tokens but repeated, private acts. She allowed, almost to herself, "There are repeated purchases here. You have come back more than once, Adrian. You didn't just experiment for a night." Her voice held something that was not only accusation, surprise, and the small, awkward opening that came with recognizing persistence. The suspicion thinned and an emotion that could be called something like bewildered admiration crept in, though Clara would not name it. Marcus watched that shift and interjected with practicality. Does that mean he cared enough to keep showing up? Does that make it less wrong? He looked to Clara for direction, hands knuckles white on the counter. Clara, what do you want to do now? Clara paused. She wanted to ask Adrian for the truth and for the tidy end of deceit. She wanted Marcus to stop treating the thing as a case file and to start treating it as a person in pain. Instead, she said, "Tonight, Adrian, you will tell me everything you did and every reason you did it. Then you will leave while I think. Then you will come back only if I ask. Say yes or no." Her sentences were short. They held the ledger's logic. Adrian swallowed. "Yes, I will tell you everything. I will leave if you ask." He stood there like a man giving up his last defense. He sat down at the small table and began to speak, listing dates and receipts and times he had been in the shop. He spoke plainly, and Clara marked the facts on a mental ledger. By the time he finished, the back room felt smaller. Rain eased outside into a fine mist. Clara read the receipts, the dates, and the small notes. She found one receipt tucked into the spine of a catalogue she had been keeping for rare donations. The paper there had been hidden for a reason. Adrian had deliberately placed a receipt in a book he knew she would handle. The action shifted the frame again. This was not merely anonymous attendance. It was an attempt to leave a map to himself in the shape of small kindnesses. Clara stood and walked to the front window. She watched the street where he had stood minutes before. A memory returned with the clarity of a recorded moment, the embossed invitation that had slid from a wet pocket and struck the bookstore floor weeks ago. She had bent without thinking then, too, and the crest had made her stomach tighten with suspicion. That earlier moment and tonight's fall were now two linked events in a pattern. She turned back to Adrian. Adrian's voice followed her. "Clara, I understand if you want me gone. I understand if you never want to see me again. I only ask that you understand why I did it. I am not looking for an excuse." His eyes were fixed on his hands. "I feared people would like me because of a name, because of arrangements assigned to me. I wanted to be chosen in a room that smelled of old paper and tea." His phrasing was careful. He did not use abstract defenses. He named the spaces he had sought. Marcus cut the tension with a question that sounded like his own fear. "What did you gain from this, Adrian? Specifically, did you get affection? Did you get information? Did you get leverage?" He paced a line near the counter and then stopped, looking directly at Adrian. Adrian's answer came quick, almost defensive. "I gained honest conversation sometimes. I gained nights where I could be ordinary. I think I gained a chance to see how I behaved when not accompanied by expectations. I did not gain leverage. I did not plan to take anything from Clara." He Clara's name slowly, as if measuring the sound. Marcus' brow stayed knit. "That's not for you to decide alone." He Clara's name. "Clara, you tell him what you want." He looked at her for the decision he already suspected she would make. Clara listened to both men and felt the emotional weight pressing inward. First suspicion, then anger, then a reluctant softening, then a new suspicion as she read receipts. Her hands were steady because she concentrated on small actions. Placing each receipt in a neat pile, sliding the invitation into a drawer, closing the ledger. She did not want to speak from a place of sudden mercy. She wanted to choose by facts. "Adrian, you broke my trust. That is concrete. You came into my life with a plan that used my shop as a laboratory. But you also left receipts here for real purchases. Those are concrete, too. I will not pretend the receipts erase the betrayal. They only show you did something else as well. You must leave tonight. You must not come back until I ask." Her voice was a measured instruction instead of a plea. Adrian nodded with a movement that looked like acceptance and pain at once. "I will go. Tonight. But please hear me one more time. I care for this place. I did not set out to harm." He folded his hands together on the table and watched Clara, as if he believed the act of watching might make his words true. Marcus stood to the side but did not leave. He kept the knit cap between his palms. "When you leave your coat and your receipts as proof that you will not come back in secret," he said. "That's the only way this ends without more trouble." His voice had the bluntness of someone who kept doors bolted for a living. Instead of packing his coat at once, Adrian for a final, private conversation in the rooftop shelter he rented 2 blocks over, a place with a narrow view of the city and a small bench. "Clara, one last time. Let me tell you the whole truth up there. If, after that, you say I'm finished, I will be finished." His offer sounded like a plea, and an attempt to be held accountable in a place where no one else would interrupt. Clara considered the offer like a calculus of risk. She recognized the pattern from the embossed invitation sliding across the floor, and the valet ticket in the coat pocket in the private library. She also recognized the quiet purchases and the receipts tucked into books. The receipts argued for continuity. The invitation argued for secrecy. "Marcus, I will go with him to the rooftop. Marcus, you come too." Her command was small but decisive. Marcus did not need telling twice. He grabbed his satchel and they left the back room together. The bell above the door chimed as the 3 of them stepped into the mist. Rain had slowed to a soft, constant fall that blurred the street lamp halos into thin rings of light. The walk was short. Clara kept her scarf tight, the wool pressing at her throat. She thought about how often she had trusted the sound of a step on the creaky floorboard by the magazine rack, and wished for the steadiness of that small rhythm. They took the narrow service stairs up to the rooftop access. The rooftop smelled of metal and rain and the city's distant diesel. Wind hit Clara's wool coat and tugged at the scarf. The city spread out in low lights and small, rain-mottled glass. Adrian stood by the low wall, his overcoat buttoned, the city at his back. The rooftop was exposed and the wind held no illusions. Adrian faced her and began, hands in his pockets. "Clara, I am Adrian Vale. My family name carries holdings and obligations. I was raised with expectations tied to that name. I tried to see if someone here could like me without it." He paused. "I am sorry for the deception. I am sorry for using your shop as a place to test myself. The thing I feared most was being chosen for the name rather than for how I stood in a room. I thought if I removed the name, I would see how I behaved when not given everything." His words were plain. He did not plead. He explained. Clara listened to the facts and to the way his voice changed when he said his name. She felt a surge of anger, betrayal again, because the line between wanting to be ordinary and making someone else into proof was thin and Adrian had crossed it. "You put me at the center of your test. You decided that my life was a suitable measuring stick. You made choices for me." Her sentences were short, sharp. Adrian stepped closer. "I know. I am asking you to judge the man I was when I removed the name, not the man who carried it into rooms. I knew you kept a ledger. I knew you noticed small things. I thought you might be the truest measure." His breath fogged in front of him. "I cannot change the deception. I can only show you who I was when I came here without the crest." He looked at Marcus. "Marcus, you can call me out. Ask me anything. I will answer." Marcus did. "Did you plan on a future where the truth would be useful to you?" His voice had the directness of someone who had seen transactions thinly veiled as romance. "Did you keep lists of our vulnerabilities? Did you ever think of this as leverage?" He added each question in a blunt rhythm. Adrian's face hard as he answered, "No, I did not. I wanted ordinary nights. I read here. I bought a sandwich and paid cash. The receipts are real. The conversations were real. I did not plan to use anything against Clara." He looked at Clara and then down at his hands. "I came to see if I could be myself, without people most often expecting some from me." The answer was a denial and a statement of motive. Clara felt another emotion shift as she watched him, from anger to a sharp, unsettled pity. The change was small and she checked it like a ledger. Feeling pity did not mean forgiving deception. It did mean she could see how his fear of being chosen for a name had driven him into a choice that hurt someone else. I understand why you feared that. I do not understand why you chose to experiment on me without asking. She paused and then asked the question that had been rising in her since the curb. Did you ever plan to tell me? Adrian's throat moved. I thought I would eventually. I thought I would tell you when I could risk losing you honestly. I was a coward about that. I thought a slow telling would be kinder than a sudden reveal. I was wrong. I see that now. He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. I am sorry. The rooftop wind filled the pause. For several long seconds there was only the sound of rain and the low city hum. Clara's hands tightened on the edge of the rooftop wall. She thought of practical things, how the shop stayed afloat, who had helped during the winter sale, and of private ones. How often she had looked up to find Adrian reading in the corner. She thought of the stack of receipts and the way paper felt when it had been folded and kept in a pocket. Each detail reframed motive. Marcus cut across the moment. So what now? Do you expect to come back like nothing happened? Do you expect trust to rebuild by osmosis? He Adrian directly the question like an inspection light. Adrian's answer was immediate. No. I expect to be judged by my actions. I will not come back unless Clara asks. I will leave my coat and receipts as proof. I will accept whatever consequence she asks. I will not try to manipulate the outcome. He looked at Clara and added, if you ever want proof that I tried to be honest, with no strings, ask me to show you where I put receipts and why. I will show you everything. No secrets left. His tone was stripped to intentions. Clara felt herself tighten, thinking of her shop as a place people could use. She thought of the ledger page where she recorded anonymous donations. She thought of Marcus and how steady he had been. She thought of the private library table where she had once found a valet ticket folded into a coat. The pattern had repeated itself and the rooftop had made everything visible. Leave now. Leave the coat. Leave the receipts. Come back only if I ask. I need time to look at every piece you've left and decide if they mean care or control. Her voice was small and exact. She turned from him and walked all the way to the stairwell. Marcus followed and Adrian remained by the low wall, a figure under the city light. That night the bookstore closed late. Marcus stayed until she locked the back door and checked the windows. He did not press her for a decision. He made tea and set it on the counter, and they shared silence that moved from frozen to a kind of solid company. Clara placed the receipts in a folded envelope and tucked it into the ledger. The physical act felt precise. She wanted to keep the facts neat. In the morning, she opened the shop and found, on the table in the reading nook, a single book left upright with a faded receipt folded inside its pages. The spine had her smudge of stamp, a mark she used to track rare donations. She lifted the paper and read the date. The night before. The receipt was for a sandwich and an old paperback, folded carefully, edges softened by pocket searching. It was not a proof of innocence. It was a choice to leave something small and tangible. Clara set the book back on the shelf with the receipt tucked like a quiet note. She closed the ledger and ran her finger along the margin. She had no sudden declaration. She had an action. She would reserve a spot on the shelf for people who left receipts and notes and wanted her to choose what they meant. She would show the receipts to Marcus and catalogue the dates. She would not pretend the betrayal had not happened. Adrian watched from across the street as the shop's morning light came on. He did not move. He had left his coat on the hook in the back room the night before, as he promised. He had gone away, and he had asked to be judged by the facts he left behind. Clara caught his eye through the glass briefly and did not gesture. She did not wave him away. She did not call him in. She made a decision that was practical and open-ended. She would examine the receipts and his actions before any conversation that might be honest could resume. Marcus gave Adrian a look and then focused on closing a crate of new arrivals. He to Clara, Whatever you decide, I have your back. I'll keep an eye on the records, and I won't let anyone take advantage. His words were concrete offers. Be present at the register, check donation dates, call him if anything odd happened. He did not offer platitudes. He stood in the place of practical support. Clara's final act that morning was small and exact. She slid one folded receipt into the spine of the catalogue she kept for rare donations and placed a margin note beside the entry, checked. Leave space for explanation. Then she closed the book and sat at the counter, hands folded on the ledger. She considered the receipts and the invitation and the rooftop confession, and she let the facts sit. The last line of the chapter was not a promise born of speech, but a set of actions that rearranged trust. She would take time, check every receipt, and ask Adrian to return only when she had read them all. Emotion root, suspicion. The chapter began with suspicion at the curb and moved through shifts of anger, bewildered curiosity, protective confrontation, and cautious consideration. Clara chose action over immediate forgiveness. The rooftop confession revealed motive. The receipts revealed persistence. Marcus's bluntness forced accountability. Morning's single bookmarked book closed the sequence with a concrete, situational decision that tied to the events. Clara would examine the receipts and the reasons before allowing Adrian back in as anything more than a customer. Clara placed the bookmarked book back on its shelf, the faded receipt tucked inside a promise of sorts. Not a vow, but a process. She closed the ledger, and the shop filled with the ordinary noises of a day that had to continue despite the rearranged pieces of trust.